The first mistake the hegemony made was assuming Earth would be grateful. Admiral Corvish Velthorn stood on the bridge of the Sovereign's Pride, watching the blue marble of humanity's homeworld grow larger in the viewport. Behind him, 300 warships of the galactic hegemony's first fleet maintained perfect formation. A display of power that had convinced 47 species to surrender without firing a shot. Signal from the surface, Admiral, reported communications officer. Yuleth, they're requesting a diplomatic meeting. Corvash's mandibles clicked in amusement. How quaint. They still think they have a choice. He turned to his tactical officer. Deployment status. All planetary siege platforms are in position. Orbital bombardment grid is active. The humans' primitive defense satellites have been neutralized. Tactical officer grins, for eyes gleamed with professional satisfaction. Their cities are defenseless. The humans had been discovered only 6 months ago by a routine hegemony scout ship, a species that had barely achieved faster than light travel, confined to a single system, wielding technology centuries behind hegemony standards. They should have been easy to integrate in other client species to add to the hegemony's vast empire. But intelligence reports had been troubling. Corvish accessed his command tablet. Reviewing the data again, humanity's history was a litany of warfare unlike anything in the hegemony's records. While other species fought for resources or territory, humans seemed to wage war for abstract concepts: freedom, honor, revenge. They had a disturbing tendency to continue fighting, even when victory was impossible. More concerning were the intercepted communications. Instead of the expected panic or attempts at negotiation, human military frequencies buzzed with cold, methodical preparation. They weren't trying to flee or surrender, they were getting ready to fight. Admiral Yuleth interrupted his thoughts. The human delegation is requesting to meet aboard their orbital station rather than surrender on the surface. Corvish considered this. Protocol demanded he force them to come aboard his flagship. But he was curious about these strange creatures. Very well, we'll dock with their station. Full security detail. The human orbital station was a crude affair compared to hegemony architecture, all angular metal and exposed conduits. But as Corvash's shuttle approached, he noticed something that made his stomach tighten. The station bristled with weapons, primitive railguns, and missile tubes. True, but far more than any civilian facility should mount dot. As they docked, Corvish was met by 3 humans. The leader was a woman with steel gray hair and eyes like Winter Director Vasquez of the Earth Defense Consortium. Beside her stood General Nakamura, whose scarred face spoke of battles fought and survived. The third was someone Corvash's intelligence had flagged as particularly dangerous. Dr. Kane Holloway, Earth's chief weapons researcher. Welcome to Terras Station, Vasquez said, her voice carrying no warmth. I trust your journey was comfortable. Corvish activated his translation matrix and spoke in the human's dominant language. I am Admiral Corvish Velthorn of the Galactic Hegemony. I come bearing an offer of citizenship and protection under hegemony law. How generous. Vasquez replied, and what would this citizenship entail? Integration into our economic and military systems. Your young men and women would serve in our fleets. Your resources would contribute to hegemony prosperity. Your leaders would answer to hegemony governors. Corvish gestured expansively. In return, you receive the protection of the galaxy's greatest power and access to technologies beyond your current understanding. The 3 humans exchanged glances. General Nakamura stepped forward. And if we decline this generous offer, Corvash's mandibles spread in what his species considered a smile, then I would be forced to secure compliance through more direct means. 300 warships orbit your planet, General. Your choice is simple: citizenship or conquest. Dr. Holloway spoke for the first time, his voice carrying an odd note of amusement. Admiral, may I ask how many species have accepted your offer voluntarily? 47. Corvish replied proudly. And how many have refused? Corvash's confidence wavered slightly. None. None have been foolish enough to refuse. Director Vasquez nodded slowly. Then you've never encountered a species quite like us. She gestured to a viewport showing Earth below. Admiral, that planet down there has seen 5,000 years of continuous warfare. We've fought with sticks and stones, swords and cannons, bullets and bombs, and weapons that can crack atoms. We've never known a generation without war, which is why, General Nakamura continued, we've spent the last 6 months since your scouts found us preparing for this conversation. Dr. Holloway smiled an expression that made Corvash's skin crawl. You see, Admiral, you made one critical error in your intelligence gathering. You assumed that because we haven't left our solar system, we haven't been preparing to defend it. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the hegemony fleet. Corvash's communication implant crackled to life. Admiral, massive energy signatures detected throughout the system. Unknown vessels decloaking. Through the viewport, Corvash watched in horror as space around his fleet erupted with light. Hundreds of human warships, sleek and deadly, shimmered into existence. They had been there all along, hidden by some impossible technology, waiting. Director Vasquez stood, her expression carved from granite. Admiral Corvash Velthorn of the Galactic Hegemony. Let me be clear about something. Earth isn't some backward world waiting for salvation. We are already an empire of one world that has never bowed to anyone. The station shuddered as the first exchange of fire began in the void beyond. Welcome, she said, to humanity's war. The opening salvo shattered the illusion of hegemony superiority in a blaze of kinetic fury. Captain Alara Voss gripped the command chair of the UES Retribution. As her ship's railguns spoke in thunderous harmony, the hegemony cruiser Divine Authority staggered under the impact, its energy shields flaring and failing as tungsten penetrators, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through its hull like tissue paper. Target destroyed, reported Weapons Officer Linjiao, his voice steady despite the enormity of what they just accomplished. Hegemony vessel breaking apart across 3 sections. Around them, the hidden human fleet was executing the most audacious military maneuver in galactic history for 6 months. While the hegemony had assumed Earth was defenseless, humanity had been moving ships into position throughout the solar system, cloaked by experimental quantum fold technology reverse-engineered from captured scout ships. 300 human vessels had waited in perfect silence. Now they struck with the coordinated precision of a species that had perfected warfare. Admiral, Corvash's voice crackled across all frequencies, his translator barely keeping up with his alien panic. Impossible. Your technology readings indicated primitive capability. From the bridge of the flagship UES Defiance, Admiral Marcus Kane smiled grimly as he watched hegemony vessels explode in brilliant fireballs. Admiral Corvash, this is Admiral Kane of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your intelligence was correct. Our technology is primitive compared to yours. The difference is we've learned to make primitive technology very, very deadly. The tactical display showed the battle's progression. Hegemony vessels, designed for suppressing lightly armed colonies, found themselves facing an enemy that fought like demons. Human ships were smaller, less advanced, but they moved with lethal intent. Where hegemony captains hesitated, shocked by unexpected resistance, human commanders pressed their attacks with ruthless efficiency. The Retribution rolled through a complex evasive pattern as hegemony plasma bolts seared past her hull. Captain Voss had cut her teeth in the Martian Independence War and the Belt Conflicts battles, where hesitation meant death and victory went to the most ruthlessly aggressive. Multiple contacts bearing to 7 Mark IV, called Sensor Operator Chen. Hegemony dreadnought moving to intercept. Voss studied the massive vessel on her screens. The hegemony's fist was 10 times the size of her ship, bristling with weapons that could reduce planets to glass. But size meant nothing if you couldn't hit your target. Helm. Attack pattern Voss 7. All power to engines. The Retribution dove toward the dreadnought at maximum acceleration. Her crew pressed deep into their restraints by forces that would have liquefied most alien species. Humans, products of a heavy gravity world and millennia of violence, endured. Hegemony plasma lanced through space where the Retribution had been moments before. The human ship twisted through impossible maneuvers, her hull groaning under stresses that should have torn her apart. But human engineering, born from necessity and perfected through countless wars, held dot at point-blank range. Voss triggered every weapon her ship carried: railgun rounds, nuclear-tipped missiles, and experimental particle beams converged on a single point of the dreadnought's hull. The massive alien vessel shields collapsed, and her weapons punched deep into its superstructure. The hegemony's fist died in a chain reaction of secondary explosions that lit up half the solar system. Meanwhile, on Terra Station, Admiral Corvash found himself trapped in humanity's web. His security detail lay unconscious, victims of sedative gas that had flooded the station's corridors. The humans had been prepared for everything. This is impossible, he gasped, watching his fleet die. On the station's tactical displays, We are the hegemony. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. Dr. Holloway leaned back in his chair, seemingly relaxed despite the carnage outside. Admiral, that's your problem right there. You've been conquering sheep for so long, you forgot what wolves look like. General Nakamura pointed to the tactical display. Your ships are designed for orbital bombardment and suppressing uprisings. Ours are designed to kill other warships. We've been fighting each other for 5,000 years. We know how to make war. The display showed hegemony forces falling back, their formation dissolving under humanity's assault. Ships that had moments before held absolute power over Earth now fled desperately for the edge of the system. But Admiral Kane wasn't done with them. All units, this is Defiance. Execute Wounded Wolf Protocol. No hegemony vessel leaves the system intact across the human fleet. Captains who had spent their careers preparing for interstellar war pressed their advantage. The hegemony had come, expecting easy conquest, and found themselves facing humanity's true nature, not the peaceful explorers of science fiction dreams, but apex predators forged in the furnace of perpetual conflict. The cruiser Sarajevo caught the fleeing hegemony flagship as it tried to reach jump distance. Captain Torres, veteran of 3 civil wars and the Jupiter exclusion zone crisis, showed no mercy. Her ship's weapons batteries spoke in precise, deadly harmony, crippling the alien vessel's engines and leaving it dead in space. Hegemony flagship. This is Captain Torres. You have 30 seconds to surrender before I blow you apart. Kovaš's voice came through the static, broken and defeated. We surrender. I surrender. But even as the immediate battle wound down, sensors detected new contacts at the edge of the system. More hegemony ships, drawn by distress signals from the dying fleet. Director Vasquez studied the approaching reinforcements with cold calculation. Admiral Kane, how many ships are we tracking? At least 500, Director. Looks like they're taking us seriously now. Vasquez nodded grimly. Humanity had won the first battle through surprise and superior tactics. But the hegemony's true strength was about to reveal itself. The real war was just beginning. Signal all civilian populations, she ordered. Initiate Protocol Omega. All non-essential personnel to deep shelters. All military personnel to battle stations. She turned to the imprisoned Admiral Corvish, whose alien features had gone pale with shock. Admiral, you wanted to know what happens when someone refuses your offer of citizenship. You're about to find out what happens when someone offers citizenship to Earth. The hegemony's response was swift, massive, and utterly without mercy. Grand Admiral HFY Mandel commanded the largest fleet in hegemony history, 1,500 warships representing the combined might of 43 member species. As his armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, his 8 eyes reflected the cold fury of an empire that had never been challenged. Scan the system, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute power. I want every human vessel identified and targeted. The tactical display that materialized before him showed a scene of devastation, the wreckage of 300 hegemony ships drifted in expanding clouds of debris, while human vessels moved in careful patterns among the ruins. The sight sent ripples of rage through his segmented frame. Intelligence reports confirmed, his tactical officer reported. Humans have established defensive positions throughout the system, asteroid fortresses, weaponized space stations, minefields, and mobile fleet units. They've turned their entire solar system into a fortress, HFY's mandibles ground together. In his 500 years of service, no species had dared such defiance. The humans hadn't just refused citizenship, they had obliterated a hegemony fleet and prepared for full-scale war, open communications to all human vessels. He ordered. Admiral Kane's face appeared on the main screen, his expression carved from granite. Behind him, the bridge of the UES Defiance hung with controlled activity. Grand Admiral Vormandel, I presume. You've come a long way to die. I am HFY Vormandel, Supreme Fleet Commander of the Galactic Hegemony. You will surrender immediately, or I will turn your world into molten slag. Kane's smile was devoid of warmth. Grand Admiral, let me explain something about humanity. We don't surrender. We don't compromise. And we sure as hell don't bow to self-appointed galactic overlords. You face 1,500 warships. Human. Your system contains perhaps 400 vessels. The mathematics are simple. Mathematics, Kane replied, don't account for human ingenuity, as if summoned by his words. The space around the hegemony fleet erupted in controlled chaos. What the aliens had dismissed as asteroid debris suddenly revealed itself as camouflaged Weapons platforms, railgun rounds each the size of a building, streaked across the void at relativistic speeds. The hegemony destroyer compliance simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a tungsten penetrator that hit with the force of a nuclear weapon. Around it, a dozen more ships staggered under impacts that their energy shields couldn't deflect. All units, weapons free, HFY roared, burnt every human installation from space. The hegemony fleet's response was overwhelming. Plasma beams that could melt continents lanced through space, seeking human targets. Antimatter warheads detonated in brilliant spheres of annihilation. Particle cannons that could crack moons fired in perfect synchronization. But the humans were no longer where the targeting systems expected them to be. Captain Voss pushed the Retribution through a series of maneuvers that should have been impossible. Human ships didn't just move through space, they danced through it, using gravitational fields and stellar phenomena with an intimacy born from centuries of desperate innovation. Plasma barrage incoming, reported Weapons Officer Zhao, 37. Separate beams converging on our position. Ghost Protocol, Voss commanded. The Retribution dove directly into the corona of the sun, her specially designed heat shields glowing white hot as she skimmed through stellar plasma. The hegemony targeting systems, designed for conventional space combat, lost lock as the human ship became indistinguishable from the star's surface. From within the solar corona, human ships struck like demons emerging from hell itself. The hegemony cruiser Eternal Victory never saw the missiles that erupted from the sun's chromosphere, their heat signatures masked by stellar radiation until impact. But humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their weapons, it was their absolute refusal to accept defeat. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blackwood commanded the asteroid fortress designated Ceres Base. A hollowed-out planetoid turned into humanity's largest weapons platform. As hegemony ships closed on her position, she made a decision that would become legend. All personnel to escape pods, she ordered. Prepare for Protocol Ultima. Her crew stared at her in shock. Protocol Ultima was theoretical a last resort, measure that no one had expected to use. Commander, her XO protested, that will destroy the entire base and take half their fleet with it. Blackwood replied grimly, humanity doesn't retreat. We take our enemies with us. As the last escape pod cleared the asteroid, Blackwood triggered the base's self-destruct. But this wasn't a simple explosion. Human engineers had turned Ceres Base into the largest kinetic weapon in history. The asteroid's mass drivers fired in perfect sequence, accelerating the entire planetoid toward the center of the hegemony formation. Grand Admiral HFY watched in horror as a weaponized asteroid, massing billions of tons, hurtled toward his flagship at a significant fraction of light speed. Point defense systems that could stop missiles were useless against an entire planetoid. The Supreme Authority and 43 surrounding vessels vanished in an impact that registered on sensors as a miniature supernova dot, but the hegemony's numbers were overwhelming. For every alien ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. Human vessels, despite their superior tactics and desperate courage, began to fall. The destroyer UES Verdun died covering the retreat of damaged vessels, her captain ramming his ship into a hegemony battlecruiser rather than surrender. The heavy cruiser Stalingrad fought until her weapons ran dry, then used her last functioning systems to broadcast tactical data to other human ships before enemy fire silenced her forever. On Earth's surface, the civilian population watched the battle in the sky with grim determination. They had known this day would come, the day when humanity's refusal to bow would be tested by superior force. In the deepest bunkers beneath the Rocky Mountains, President Elena Martinez authorized humanity's final gambit. Dr. Holloway, status. On Project Prometheus, the chief weapons researcher looked up from his console, his face gaunt with exhaustion. Ready for deployment, Madam President. But once we trigger it, there's no going back. We'll be committed to total war. The hegemony has already committed us to that, Martinez replied. Execute Prometheus. Show the galaxy what happens when you threaten Earth. Deep beneath the lunar surface, machines that had been humanity's most closely guarded secret for 20 years began to power up. The moon, Earth's ancient companion, was about to reveal its true purpose in humanity's war for survival. The real battle was about to begin. The moon cracked open like an egg, revealing humanity's most audacious secret. Grand Admiral HFY stared in disbelief as Luna's surface split along pre-designed fault lines, enormous sections of the satellite's crust sliding away to reveal the vast construction hidden beneath. where astronomers had always seen a dead rock. Human engineers had spent decades hollowing out the largest weapons platform in the solar system. What in the void's name? He whispered, his 8 eyes struggling to process what they were seeing. The Luna installation was magnificent in its brutal simplicity. Mass drivers the size of city blocks emerged from concealed bays. Particle beam arrays that drew power directly from fusion reactors built into the moon's core began to charge with energies that made stars seem dim. Most terrifying of all, the entire satellite began to move, its hidden propulsion systems overcoming billions of years of orbital mechanics. Dr. Holloway's voice crackled across all frequencies, transmitted from his command bunker deep beneath the lunar surface. Attention Hegemony Fleet, you are now in range of Luna Base's primary weapons. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal from this system. Deck's highest mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or hysteria. You turned your moon into a weapon. We turned our moon into a fortress, came Admiral Kane's voice from the bridge of the Defiance. The weapon is just a bonus. The first salvo from Luna Base redefined the concept of overwhelming firepower. Mass drivers that could accelerate projectiles to near-light speed fired in perfect synchronization, their tungsten rounds crossing the void in seconds. The Hegemony battle line, caught in formation, had no time to scatter. 17 Hegemony vessels simply ceased to exist, vaporized by kinetic impacts that released more energy than nuclear weapons. The remaining ships of the first wave staggered under secondary impacts, their shields and armor useless against projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. But the Hegemony was vast, and HFY was no fool. Even as his front line died, he was adapting all vessels, scatter formation Delta 7, maximum evasion patterns, deploy gravitic mines along approach vectors. If the humans want to use their moon as a weapon, we'll show them what happens when you fight the Hegemony. The alien fleet dispersed like a deadly cloud, individual ships weaving through space in patterns that made targeting nearly impossible. Simultaneously, specialized vessels began deploying weapons that humanity had never encountered: gravitational distortion mines that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. The human destroyer UES Midway was the first to encounter the new threat. Captain Rodriguez was executing a flanking maneuver when space itself seemed to twist around his ship. The gravitic mine detonated in a cascade of distorted space-time, stretching the Midway like taffy before tearing her apart at the molecular level. All ships, be advised, Rodriguez's final transmission crackled with static. They've got gravity weapons. Avoid. The transmission cut to silence as the Midway became a cloud of scattered atoms. On Luna Base, Dr. Holloway watched his sensors. With growing alarm, they're adapting faster than projected. Mass drivers are effective, but they can't hit dispersed targets reliably that we adapt to. Came a new voice from the command center. General Nakamura had arrived on Luna during the opening phases of the battle, determined to coordinate humanity's defense from the system's most powerful weapons platform. Activate Cerberus protocol, he ordered. Throughout the Luna installation, automated systems began implementing humanity's most desperate contingency. If the moon couldn't serve as a stationary weapons platform, it would become something far more terrifying: a mobile battle station the size of a small planet. The hidden fusion drives built into Luna's core roared to life, accelerating the weaponized satellite toward the Hegemony fleet. But this wasn't a kamikaze run, it was a fighting withdrawal, designed to draw the enemy into humanity's kill zone. As the moon moved, its weapons continued firing. Particle beams that could burn through neutronium armor lanced out in all directions. Missile bays that had been disguised as craters launched swarms of nuclear-armed torpedoes. The entire satellite had become a fortress underway, bringing destruction wherever it traveled. The Hegemony's response was swift and merciless. Antimatter torpedoes, each capable of destroying a continent, converged on Luna's surface. The first impacts vaporized sections of the moon's weaponized landscape, leaving craters that glowed with residual annihilation energy. But Luna Base had been designed to survive. Deep beneath the surface, General Nakamura felt the installation shudder under impacts that would have destroyed any conventional fortification. Emergency lighting flickered as sections of the base lost power, but the fortress held. Damage report, he barked. Forward particle ray offline. Sections 7 through 12 have lost atmosphere. Casualties mounting, but primary systems are operational. Lieutenant Commander Torres transferred from her destroyed ship to help coordinate Luna's defenses. delivered the report with professional calm despite the blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. "Good enough," Nakamura replied. "Continue firing. Make them pay for every meter." The battle for Luna had become a grinding slugfest that neither side could afford to lose. Hegemony ships swarmed around the mobile fortress, their weapons carving away sections of the moon's surface, while Luna's defenders fought back with desperate fury. Captain Voss, her ship badly damaged from previous encounters, led a squadron of surviving human vessels in a desperate attempt to support Luna's withdrawal. The Retribution and her companions dove into the swirling melee, their weapons seeking targets among the alien swarm. "This is insane," Weapons Officer Zhao muttered, as plasma beams from 3 different hegemony ships converged on their position. "Insane is our specialty," Voss replied, rolling her ship through a maneuver that brought their guns to bear on a hegemony cruiser. "Fire everything," the Retribution's weapons spoke in unison, their combined firepower overwhelming the alien vessels. Defenses, the hegemony ship broke apart in a chain of explosions, but 2 more immediately moved to take its place across the battle space. Similar scenes played out as humanity's finest fought against impossible odds. Ships that should have surrendered hours ago continued fighting, their crews refusing to yield even as their vessels died around them. The USS Warsaw rammed a hegemony battleship. When her weapons failed, her captain's final words echoing across the fleet frequency, "For Earth, for humanity never surrender." But courage alone couldn't overcome the mathematics of war. For every hegemony ship destroyed, humanity lost to. The Luna installation, despite its incredible firepower, was being slowly carved apart by a time-matter bombardment. Earth's orbital defenses were failing under sustained assault. In his command bunker beneath Terra Station, Admiral Kane watched the tactical display with growing desperation. Red icons human ships were winking out faster than he could count. The blue icons representing hegemony forces seemed endless. "Sir," his aide reported quietly, "we're down to 137 operational vessels. The hegemony still has over 1,000. Kane nodded grimly. Humanity had fought magnificently, but the enemy's numerical superiority was beginning to tell. They needed a miracle, or they needed to change the rules of the game entirely. "Signal all remaining ships," he ordered, "fall back to Earth orbit. We make our final stand here." As the surviving human fleet limped back toward their homeworld, Luna Base continued its fighting retreat. General Nakamura, his fortress bleeding atmosphere and weapons, wasn't ready to give up. He had one more card to play, the most dangerous gambit in human history. The final convergence above Earth began with a symphony of destruction that could be heard across the solar system. Admiral Kane positioned his remaining ships in a defensive sphere around Earth, each vessel representing humanity's last hope against extinction. 137 human warships faced over 1,000 hegemony vessels in a battle that would determine the fate of both species. The hegemony fleet approached in a perfect formation, a wall of death that stretched across millions of cubic kilometers of space. Grand Admiral Lex High, his flagship scarred but still functional, led the assault with the cold fury of an empire that had never tasted defeat. "Begin orbital bombardment," he commanded. "I want every human installation reduced to atoms. No quarter, no mercy." The opening barrage was apocalyptic. Plasma beams hot enough to ignite atmospheres lanced toward Earth's orbital platforms. Antimatter warheads detonated in chains of annihilation that lit up the night sky visible from the surface. Particle cannons that could shatter moons fired in perfect synchronization, seeking to overwhelm Earth's defenses through sheer volume of destruction. But humanity's defenders were no longer the same species that had cowered before superior technology. 6 months ago, they had learned, adapted, and prepared for this moment. Captain Voss, her ship held together by determination and emergency repairs, led the first counterattack. The Retribution and 12 surviving destroyers dove directly into the hegemony formation, their weapons blazing in defiance of mathematical impossibility. "All ships, attack pattern Omega," she transmitted, her voice carrying the cold fury of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Close to knife fighting range and make them bleed." The human ships carved through the alien formation like sharks in a feeding frenzy. At point-blank range, hegemony shields and armor advantages meant nothing. Human railguns, designed for close-quarters combat, punched through alien hulls with devastating efficiency. The hegemony cruiser Divine Supremacy exploded as the destroyer UES Bunker Hill rammed her fusion core both ships vanishing in a fireball that registered on sensors as a miniature star. The Retribution rolled through the debris field, her weapons seeking new targets with mechanical precision. But for every hegemony ship they destroyed, the aliens extracted a terrible price. The human destroyer HFY Thermopylae died under concentrated fire from 6 enemy vessels, her hull torn apart by plasma beams until her reactor containment failed. The used Normandy lasted 30 seconds longer before a gravitic mine tore her into component atoms. Captain Torres, fighting from the bridge of the heavy cruiser UES Stalingrad, watched her tactical display fill with red icons as human ships died around her. Her own vessel had lost half her weapon and was venting atmosphere from 17 hull breaches. But she kept fighting. Weapons, target that battleship, she ordered, indicating a hegemony vessel that was systematically destroying Earth's orbital infrastructure. We're down to our last magazine, Weapons Officer Chen reported. 12 rounds remaining. Then make them count, Torres replied grimly. The Stalingrad's final salvo caught the hegemony battleship amidships, her tungsten penetrators punching through energy shields weakened by previous impacts. The alien vessel staggered, her port side erupting in secondary explosions, but she didn't die. Instead, she turned her full attention to the human cruiser. All hands, brace for impact, Torres announced calmly as plasma beams converged on her position. The Stalingrad died as she had, lived fighting to the last breath. Her hull glowed white-hot under the alien barrage before finally giving way. But even as she broke apart, her emergency beacon continued transmitting tactical data to surviving human ships. Meanwhile, the Luna installation was making its final approach to Earth orbit. General Nakamura, his fortress now little more than a weapon-studded asteroid trailing debris, had kept his mobile base fighting through sheer bloody-minded determination. Sir, we've lost primary power to Sections 1 through 40, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported, her face streaked with blood and soot. Life support is failing throughout the base. How long until we reach optimal firing position? Nakamura asked, ignoring the reports of catastrophic damage. 3 minutes, sir. Then we hold for 3 minutes. Nakamura turned to address his remaining crew over the internal communication system. All hands, this is the general. We've lost most of our weapons, most of our life support, and most of our hope. But we still have one thing the enemy doesn't: we're human, and humans don't quit. As Luna Base entered Earth orbit, its remaining weapons blazing, the hegemony fleet found itself caught between a mobile fortress and Earth's defending ships. It should have been a simple matter of concentrating fire to destroy both threats. But humanity had one more surprise. Earth itself was armed. Hidden installations across the planet's surface suddenly revealed themselves. Mass drivers built into mountain ranges began firing projectiles into orbit. Particle beam arrays disguised as radio telescopes added their energies to the defensive barrage. Most devastating of all, the planet's magnetic field itself became a weapon as hidden generators created focused electromagnetic pulses that disabled hegemony electronics. The hegemony destroyer Perfect Order simply went dark as Earth's magnetic weapon overloaded every system on the ship. Dead in space, she became an easy target for the lunar installation's remaining guns. But the planet's weapons were defensive, not offensive. They could protect her from bombardment, but they couldn't destroy the hegemony fleet. For that, humanity needed its ships that were dying faster than they could be replaced. Admiral Kane, his flagship surrounded by the debris of destroyed vessels, made the hardest decision of his career. All remaining ships implement final protocol. We end this here. Throughout the human fleet, captains who had been preparing for this moment their entire careers began shutting down their ship's safety systems. If they couldn't win through superior firepower, they would win through superior desperation. The heavy cruiser UES Yorktown, her weapons depleted and her hull cracked, accelerated toward the hegemony flagship at maximum burn. Captain Morrison, the last survivor on his bridge, transmitted his final words. "This is for every world you've conquered, you bastards." The Yorktown struck the highest flagship at nearly 10% of light speed. The impact vaporized both ships instantly, creating a fireball that temporarily outshone the sun. The Grand Admiral died still trying to understand how a primitive species had brought the hegemony to the brink of defeat. Around the expanding plasma cloud, other human ships followed the Yorktown's example. The destroyer UES Enterprise rammed a hegemony battlecruiser, The frigate UES Constitution detonated her reactor core in the middle of an enemy formation. The transport UES Liberty, pressed into combat service despite being a civilian vessel, took 6 hegemony ships with her when her captain triggered an antimatter explosion. In 30 minutes of the most intense fighting in galactic history, humanity lost over 60 ships, but they took 300 hegemony vessels with them, reducing the alien fleet to fewer than 700 operational units on Luna base. General Nakamura prepared to add his fortress to the toll. The installation was dying, her weapons failing one by one, but she still had mass and velocity. As he aimed the weaponized moon toward the center of the remaining hegemony formation, he opened a final communication to Earth. This is Luna base. To all human forces, it has been an honor serving with you. Tell our children that we held the line. The moon, humanity's ancient companion, prepared to make one final sacrifice in defense of the world that had given it purpose. The moment General Nakamura triggered Luna base's final protocol, space-time itself seemed to hold its breath. The weaponized moon, its remaining fusion drives burning at 110% capacity, accelerated toward the heart of the hegemony fleet with the unstoppable momentum of celestial mechanics. But this wasn't just a collision, it was humanity's most desperate gambit made. Manifest all remaining vessels, clear the targeting zone. Nakamura transmitted as Luna base's final weapons charged for one last salvo. We're going to show these bastards what happens when you threaten Earth. The surviving hegemony fleet, now under the command of Vice Admiral Kethmer after the highest death, recognized the threat too late. 600 alien warships scrambled to escape the trajectory of an entire moon, moving at combat velocity, but physics is an unforgiving master. Impossible, Kethmer breathed, his 4 eyes tracking the massive object on his tactical display. They've weaponized their entire satellite. Luna base's death was magnificent in its fury. Every remaining weapon on the fortress fired simultaneously mass drivers, particle beams, nuclear missiles, and experimental weapons that humanity had never dared test in combat. The combined barrage carved through the hegemony formation like a scythe. Through the alien battleship Supreme Dominion simply ceased to exist, vaporized by a particle beam that drew power from Luna's dying reactors. 3 hegemony cruisers were crushed by mass driver rounds the size of skyscrapers. Dozens of smaller vessels found themselves caught in the expanding debris field as sections of the moon's weaponized surface broke away under the stress of combat acceleration. But the true weapon wasn't the fortress, it was General Nakamura's final surprise. Deep within Luna base's core, buried beneath layers of armor and weapon systems, lay humanity's most closely guarded secret. Project Omega had been theoretical until 6 months ago, when the discovery of the hegemony made the impossible necessary. As the fortress approached the center of the alien fleet, Nakamura activated a device that violated several laws of physics and definitely violated the galactic conventions on warfare. The artificial singularity generator, powered by the controlled collapse of Luna's remaining mass, created a gravitational anomaly that bent space-time into impossible configurations. The effect was localized but devastating. Gravity waves rippled outward from Luna base's position, tearing apart any vessel caught within 100,000 kilometers. Hegemony ships that had survived the initial weapons barrage found themselves stretched and compressed by tidal forces that no amount of technology could counter. Vice Admiral Kethmer watched in horror as his flagship's hull began to elongate, pulled toward the artificial black hole that had once been humanity's moon. All ships, emergency jump, he screamed. Get us out of here. But hyperspace jumps required precise calculations and stable space-time. The gravitational chaos surrounding Luna base made faster-than-light travel impossible. Ships that attempted to jump found themselves torn apart by conflicting dimensional stresses. The artificial singularity lasted only 17 seconds before collapsing in on itself. But those 17 seconds cost the hegemony nearly 200 vessels. The survivors found themselves scattered, disorganized, and facing an enemy that refused to die despite impossible odds. Admiral Kane commanded humanity's last 43 ships. From the bridge of the UES Defiance, seized the moment with the instincts of a predator. All vessels, attack formation Delta, hit them while they're scattered. The remaining human fleet, battered and bloodied but still fighting, fell upon the disorganized hegemony survivors like wolves on wounded prey. Ships that had been designed for exploration, and colonization had been transformed into instruments of pure destruction, their crews tempered by months of desperate combat. Captain Voss, her destroyer held together by emergency welds and sheer determination, led a squadron of human ships against a group of hegemony vessels trying to reform their battle line. The Retribution had lost half her weapons and most of her armor, but her crew fought with the fury of the damned. Target the command ship, she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Take out their coordination and the rest will scatter. The hegemony cruiser Final Authority was larger, better armed, and technologically superior to anything in the human squadron, but her crew was demoralized, their fleet broken, their commanders dead or scattered. When the Retribution and her companions opened fire, the alien vessel's response was sluggish and uncoordinated. Human weapons, designed for close-quarters brutality, tore through hegemony defenses with mechanical precision. The Final Authority staggered under the combined barrage, her shields collapsing and her hull rupturing in a dozen places. As secondary explosions rippled through her superstructure, the alien vessel broke apart in a fireball that lit up the entire engagement zone around her. Other human ships pressed their advantages with ruthless efficiency. The destroyer UES Lexington caught a fleeing hegemony frigate and disabled her with a precision strike to her engines. The cruiser UES Gettysburg coordinated with two surviving frigates to overwhelm a hegemony battleship that should have been able to destroy all three human vessels. But it was Dr. Holloway, broadcasting from his command bunker deep beneath Earth's surface, who delivered the killing blow to hegemony morale. Attention remaining hegemony forces. His voice crackled across all frequencies. You came here expecting easy conquest. Instead, you found something your empire has never encountered, a species that would rather die than kneel. Look around you. Your fleet is broken. Your commanders are dead. Your technology means nothing against human determination. The transmission was accompanied by tactical data showing the true scope of the hegemony's losses. Of the 1,500 ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 400 remain operational. The greatest fleet in galactic history had been shattered by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Vice Admiral Kethmer, his ship badly damaged and his fleet in tatters, made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. All ships begin withdrawal to minimum safe distance. Prepare for emergency jump to Rally Point Zeta. But Admiral Kane wasn't done with them yet. Negative, hegemony fleet. He transmitted coldly, you came here to destroy us. Now you get to see what happens when you fail. The remaining human ships, outnumbered 10 to 1, but fighting with the fury of a cornered predator, pressed their attack. They had learned to fight against impossible odds, to turn every disadvantage into a weapon, to make their enemies pay in blood for every meter of space. The final phase of the battle was less a military engagement than an execution. Hegemony ships, designed for suppressing lightly armed colonies, found themselves hunted by human vessels that had been forged in the crucible of perpetual warfare. Every human captain was a veteran of multiple conflicts. Every crew member had trained for this moment their entire life. Captain Morrison, having survived the destruction of 3 previous ships, commanded the destroyer USS Phoenix as she ran down fleeing hegemony vessels like a wolf pack pursuing scattered sheep. His crew had lost friends, families, and comrades to alien weapons, and they showed no mercy in return. The hegemony frigate Peaceful Compliance died under the Phoenix's guns, her hull torn apart by railgun rounds fired at point-blank range. The destroyer Inevitable Victory lasted 3 seconds longer before human missiles overwhelmed her defensive systems. When the shooting finally stopped, Vice Admiral Kethmer found himself commanding fewer than 200 ships out of the 1,500 he had brought to conquer humanity. His fleet was broken, his crews demoralized, and his enemy was still fighting despite losses that should have forced any rational species to surrender. The mathematics of warfare had been turned upside down by human psychology. Superior numbers, better technology, and overwhelming firepower meant nothing when faced with a species that simply refused to acknowledge defeat. Signal the human fleet, Kethmer ordered quietly. Request terms for withdrawal. The transmission was met with silence for several long minutes. Then Admiral Kane's voice crackled across the void, carrying the cold fury of a species that had been pushed to the brink of extinction. Vice Admiral Kethmer, you will withdraw from this system immediately. Any hegemony vessel remaining in Sol space in 1 hour will be destroyed. Any attempt to return will be met with total warfare. And Vice Admiral, When you report back to your superiors, tell them something for me." Kane paused. His next words, carrying the weight of prophecy, "Tell them that Earth remembers. Tell them that humanity never forgives. And tell them that if they ever threaten our world again, we won't just defend our system, we'll bring the war to every world in your empire." 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, the galaxy had learned to fear a new name, Terra. Ambassador Lyrics Velthane of the Hegemony Council stood before the assembled representatives of 47 species, his mandibles clicking nervously as he delivered a report that would reshape galactic politics forever. The Great Chamber on Hegemon Prime, seat of an empire that had ruled unchallenged for 3 millennia, buzzed with anxious whispers. "Honored counselors," Lyrics began, his voice carrying poorly disguised fear. "The situation with the human species has evolved beyond our initial projections." The holographic display behind him showed a 3-dimensional map of local space. Red indicators marked hegemony worlds, blue showed client species, and a single, brilliant white star marked Earth. But around that white star, new symbols were appearing, green markers that represented something the galaxy had never seen before: intelligence. Reports confirm that the humans have established what they call forward operating bases in 17 systems surrounding their homeworld. Each installation appears to be a fully militarized fortress, capable of supporting large fleet operations. Counselor Lex Highmore Valdris, whose nephew had died commanding the first hegemony fleet to attack Earth, leaned forward in his hoverchair. "Surely a single species cannot threaten the entire hegemony. They lack the population base for sustained expansion." Lyrics' mandibles clicked more rapidly. "That assumption has proven incorrect, Counselor. Human population centers are not confined to their homeworld. They have established colonies throughout their solar system and are rapidly expanding into adjacent systems. More concerning, they appear to be engineering their populations for specific purposes." The display shifted to show intercepted intelligence footage of human military installations. The assembled aliens watched in uncomfortable silence as the images revealed massive shipyards, weapons testing facilities, and training centers where human children were being prepared for interstellar warfare. "They're breeding soldiers," whispered Counselor Yethai of the Peaceful Integration faction. "An entire species dedicated to military expansion, not just soldiers," Lyrics corrected grimly. "Engineers, tacticians, pilots, weapons designers. They've turned their entire civilization into a war machine. Every human child is trained from birth in multiple forms of combat. Every human settlement is designed to serve as a fortress. Every human ship is built to kill other ships." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony had always maintained control through superior technology and overwhelming numbers. But humanity had proven that determination and tactical brilliance could overcome both advantages. "What of our remaining fleets?" asked Counselor Prime Velthoris, the ancient leader whose decision had authorized the attack on Earth. "Vice Admiral Kethmer S. survivors have established a defensive perimeter at the edge of what humans now call the Soul Exclusion Zone," Lyrics reported. "They monitor human activities, but maintain strict orders not to engage any ship that approaches within 50 light years of Earth is discouraged from proceeding." The last word carried weight that every counselor understood. 3 hegemony survey vessels had ignored human warnings in the past month. Their wreckage now drifted in space, serving as monuments to humanity's promise that they would tolerate no further intrusions. Meanwhile, on Earth, the victory celebration was notably absent of triumphalism. In the rebuilt chambers of the United Earth government, President Martinez and her advisors planned for a future that would be measured in centuries of conflict. "Status report on the fleet expansion program," she requested. Admiral Kane, now bearing the scars of a dozen battles, consulted his tactical display. The Sol system bustled with activity as massive shipyards worked round the clock to replace vessels lost in the war. But these weren't just replacement ships, they were improved designs incorporating hard-won lessons from combat against superior technology. "We'll have 500 operational warships within 8 months, Kane reported. "The new Phoenix-class destroyers are faster and more heavily armed than anything we fielded during the hegemony assault. The Atlas-class battleship should be operational within the year." Dr. Holloway, his hair now completely white from the stress of war, looked up from his research notes. "The captured hegemony technology is providing useful insights. We're adapting their energy weapons and defensive systems to human engineering standards." More importantly, we've learned to counter their advantages. What about intelligence on other species? Martinez asked. The hegemony rules 4 to 7 worlds. We need to know what we're potentially facing. Director Vasquez, now bearing the title of Strategic Intelligence Coordinator, activated a holographic display showing the known galaxy. Most hegemony client species were conquered centuries ago. They've never known independence and may not have the will to fight if properly motivated. But there are indications of resistance movements on several worlds. The display highlighted worlds where rebellions had been suppressed, resources stripped, and populations enslaved. The galaxy that humanity had discovered was not one of peaceful cooperation, but of imperial domination maintained through force. Interesting possibilities. Martinez mused. An empire built on conquest can be undermanned when faced with multiple simultaneous rebellions. In the depths of space, human ships were already putting that theory to the test. Captain Voss. Her new command is state-of-the-art heavy cruiser named UES Retribution 2. Led a small task force on humanity's first offensive operation beyond Sol space. Their target was a hegemony supply depot in the Kepler 442 system, a strategic waypoint that supported alien operations across 3 sectors. The facility was defended by 12 hegemony warships and should have been impregnable to such a small force, but humanity had learned to rewrite the rules of warfare. Stealth generators online, reported Lieutenant Commander Torres. Now serving as Voss's executive officer, we're running dark and quiet. The human task force approached the alien facility, using the same quantum fold cloaking technology that had hidden their ships during the Sol battle. 2 hegemony sensors. The attacking fleet was invisible until they opened fire. The first salvo was devastating. Human weapons, refined through months of combat testing, tore through hegemony defenses. With surgical precision, the supply depot's defensive platforms died in seconds. Their sophisticated targeting systems useless against enemies they couldn't detect. All ships, weapons free, Voss commanded. Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to send a message. The message was simple and brutal. Humanity could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. The hegemony's vast empire was no longer safe behind walls of superior technology. And overwhelming numbers died as the supply depot burned. Its automated distress signals carried news of the attack. Across the galaxy, on dozens of worlds, subject species who had never dreamed of rebellion began to whisper about the humans who had defied the hegemony and won. But it was the final transmission from Captain Voss that truly changed the galactic paradigm, broadcasting on all frequencies. Her words reached every corner of hegemony space, to all oppressed peoples of the galaxy. This is Captain Voss of the United Earth Navy. The hegemony told us we had a choice: citizenship or conquest. They learned that Earth doesn't accept other people's choices. We make our own. The transmission continued, carrying a message that would topple empires, to every world held in bondage, every species forced into servitude, every civilization denied the right to self-determination. Know that you are not alone. Humanity stands ready to assist any people willing to fight for their freedom. The age of imperial domination is ending. In the years that followed, historians would mark Captain Voss's transmission as the beginning of the Galactic Liberation Wars. Within a decade, 17 species had declared independence from the hegemony. Within 20 years, the great empire that had ruled for millennia was reduced to a handful of core worlds, its fleet scattered and its authority broken. But for Admiral Kane, watching Earth's blue marble from the observation deck of humanity's newest battle station, the victory was deeply personal. The species that had been offered citizenship in someone else's empire had instead built their own, not through conquest, but through the simple promise that no sentient being should have to bow to another's will. The final message of the war came not from Earth, but from New Geneva, the first free colony established by a species liberated from hegemony rule. The Altarian people, whose homeworld had been enslaved for 8 centuries, transmitted a simple phrase in broken English: "Thank you for showing us that empires can fall." Admiral Kane smiled as he watched human ships patrol the space around Earth, no longer defending their homeworld from alien conquest, but serving as guardians of freedom for an entire galaxy. The hegemony had offered humanity citizenship. Instead, humanity had offered the galaxy something far more valuable: the chance to be free, and in the end, that made all the difference.